Hello, partners. It's Steve Mullican, Chief Operating Officer of King Operating here. Welcome back. We had a week off last week, and unfortunately for you, I'm filling in for Rachel Griffith today. So please hang on. I think we've still got a good program going today. Today I have both Aaron Ledyard, our head of our land manager here at King, and Ian Crane, who is our Senior Reservoir Engineer, who is here on the podcast for the first time. And what we're going to talk about today is, on our day-to-day operations around here, we have our team is pretty much made up of land, engineering, and then also land engineering and the geology. Poor Mark, I forgot all about him. That's kind of the thing, we don't have him on here, but anyway, the three teams, the three divisions work together. Today we've got land and engineering here. I want to sit here and kind of let them discuss a little bit about what they do and how that contributes to our day-to-day operations. So first, I want to introduce to you Ian Crane. Hey, Ian, I know this is your first time on. I'd like for you to introduce yourself and kind of give everybody a little bit of background information on how your career and how you got to this point.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. And hello, everybody. Yeah, as Steve said, Ian, that's my name. Personally, I'll give you a little bit of background so you know why. Maybe if I talk funny, you'll understand. I come from a place in the world where nobody has an accent, of course. But so I was born in London, England, raised in Scotland for 7 years before moving to Western Canada, where I functionally grew up. Did all my schooling, college, and ended up working 27 years in oil and gas in Canada before in 2015 we moved down here to Dallas. So from a perspective of the career, I started with Chevron, a company most of you will have known by very well. And in total, I've worked for 6 oil companies as a reservoir engineer, a mix of publicly traded and private companies of different sizes. Most of my work has been focused in North America. That would be, say, in Western Canada and Southern US, and a little bit of international work. And one question people ask is, how did I get into the industry? And for me, it's interesting. I'm the first and only and probably last oil guy in my family line. But I was in engineering school, and for reasons I don't really know, I got to hear about reservoir engineering, and it was a pretty small specialized group within the what was in the college I went to was the mineral engineering department, and started getting into the classes where it focused on the reservoir engineering field or discipline, and I really enjoyed it. And
hey Ian,
yes,
can you briefly describe to everybody really what a reservoir engineer does? I know we use it pretty loosely in our industry, but people may really kind of wonder what that really means.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I find that it can be very difficult to answer because it's a bit. I sometimes say to my kids it would be easier if I was a fireman because people would understand what I did. But I guess a few things to unpack that. First of all, reservoir. What is that? Well, reservoir talks about the downhole oil and gas. So first off, a reservoir engineer is focused on the technical aspects of the downhole environment that's involved in the oil and gas business. So that's my specialty, my technical specialty, if you will. Secondly, we work on the upstream side of the business, and think the reservoir I described downhole, the well that connects the reservoir to surface, and the surface facilities we don't really get too involved with pipelines and gas processing or oil refineries and things like that. I guess the third part of it I would describe as The oil and gas is a very complex business with many, many functions required to work together to bring it all together. People in all kinds of different actions in the field and the office, and within each of those environments, there's many different kind of sub-disciplines. And one of the analogies I've found useful in the past that somebody told me I thought it worked pretty good is if you think of a wagon wheel, and the spokes of the wagon wheel will be the various disciplines that are involved in making oil and gas happen. And that might include, you say a spoke for geology and geophysics and land and drilling, finance, all these different kind of aspects, and they all connect together at a hub. And what we do as a reservoir engineer at that hub of the wheel is try to take all those different bits of information and disciplines and bring them together and try to work out plans or models for everybody to work together. Another way I think there's another analogy I think is kind of, if you think of on a personality side, this one I haven't heard before, but it would be that perhaps we're like a reservoir engineer is like a mashup between say a realtor and a weather forecaster and a scientist and an economist. So you get kind of aspects of those things put together. And but functionally, sort of practically, what we do, if you put it more on a resume definition, might be that our role is to analyze, evaluate, optimize, and recommend financially prudent practices for the oil and gas opportunities.
Yeah, so guys, it is a very important role in our industry. Basically, Ian, he not only he brings in everything from geology and from production and all the surrounding wells and everything that is going on, and he will develop a projection on how the oil and gas will be extracted, and then taking that even further, then we run the models, economically to find out if it's going to be viable or not. But another big part of our team is, of course, Aaron on the land side, and sometimes I think people can understand the land side a little bit better because that's pretty much it's the real estate side of our business. We can't. What he makes sure that we do is that we have the rights to be able to drill wherever we're drilling, because we have to have those fully, the title on that, just like in your home on these minerals, we have to have them leased and titled so that we have the rights to drill it. Otherwise, we're drilling something for somebody else. So Aaron, why don't you talk about kind of some of your day-to-day business and what goes on as we're getting ready to develop?
Yeah, sure, Steve. I'd have to say a little bit like Ian, there's a lot that makes it like every day is a little bit different, kind of depending on the company's kind of direction on, if we're drilling, if we're actively drilling, then of course, I'm doing everything from assisting on the land acquisition, by working with the brokers in the field. They're running title at the courthouse for us, leasing lands, and I will say my role now here at King is an in-house land manager. Land manager is much different than when I worked in the field. But I know the ins and outs of that, so it makes it really easy to work with the brokers. And so, even the project we're working on right now in Ochiltree County, when I get in here first thing in the morning, I want to see what kind of report, where are we at on the leasing. Then I'll get on the phone and talk to these guys, kind of hear about how their conversations are going with the mineral owners or surface owners. So, every day is different. Like I said, I'll get in here, I might be on the phone, or I might spend a couple hours doing a deep dive on some title on my computer. That's one of the things, it does require a lot of communication with us, but sometimes as a landman, what you need is just some quiet. I got to shut the door so I can really concentrate on the title, because it's crucial, and it's crucial to have the title right, because I know that we'll get into talking a little bit about drilling wells and stuff, but to me, getting the land work right early on, it's a little bit like if someone's building a house. This is laying the foundation, and it's working with the geologist, it's working with Ian, making sure we get all these things right. And this is the right place to either drill a well before Kelly brings a rig in to get the well drilled. So every day is different. I will say that, Steve. It can be a combination. Like I said, land acquisition, leasing, title research, maybe due diligence. Sometimes you might just send me an email. Hey, Aaron, there's this property out here. We want to just do a quick look at it. Is it possibly open? And so I'll do a brief review, determine if it's something that maybe I can hand over to these brokers in the field and really let them do a deep dive into it to see if we can obtain that acreage. But that's just if we're drilling wells. I mean, some of the other things I do as a landman is kind of stakeholder relations. I'm always talking to the landowners, other industry partners, royalty owners, mineral owners. And usually when I get into the office in the morning, I got a little list or some notes of people I have to call. It's just kind of the way it is. So a lot of different activities in a day. And what's one of the things I like about doing land work, every day is different. It really is.
Well, yeah, and we appreciate that because, guys, land is kind of the face, ends up being kind of the face of the company out in the field. I mean, they're the ones that, like he was mentioning, we have surface owners and we have mineral owners. Lots of times they're not the same. You guys might understand this. Like if you bought your house, most houses that we buy today, you just have the surface. You might actually have minerals that have been owned by somebody, many, many years back. And so this happens even out in areas where we drill, that we go out there and we're having to lease the minerals, which are below the surface. And we have to deal with the mineral owners and work that side of it, which what Aaron does. And then there'll be a surface owner that might have a house and property out there, and then we have to work with them. But in the state of Texas, the minerals actually. You want to kind of talk about that a little bit? How how that works with surface and minerals?
Sure. It's I think I maybe mentioned it before, when doing these podcasts or on these type interviews where really the surface owner, that you would think that they would have be in the kind of the power position, but in Texas, we've been drilling for oil and gas since the early 1900s, and really mineral owners it takes precedence over surface owners, and that creates quite a bit of a problem. It's definitely in today's world where, as Steve mentioned, not all tracts are owned by one person. We might have many, many mineral owners, and they might not own the surface. So, of course, the surface owner, I mean, they own everything you see, so they feel like they're the ones in control. But if King obtains an oil and gas lease, we have the rights of ingress and egress. We can go and come as we need to, explore for oil and gas. And in court case after court case, there's been decisions made where it's leaned towards the mineral owner, or whoever. You could be, a company or just a mineral owner, and you see lots of times they win cases over surface owners, and that really creates there's a lot of tension there in today's world, because what I see is the old ranches, used to the old ranchers, they owned the mineral rights. Well, nowadays what you have is a lot of wealthy individuals. They're not necessarily in it to raise cattle. They're to own the ranch. We're kind of in a little bit different world, and they can afford the acreage. Well, if they don't own the mineral rights, they can cause a lot of problems. And from what I gather, they usually do. If they can cause a problem, they will, because they want to have some involvement. But if they aren't reaping the benefits, they're going to make it hard on the oil and gas operators. So that's just one thing where mineral rights. or proceed surface rights. And I think it's something that it doesn't make a lot of sense, but hey, in Texas, that's the way it is because you just can imagine.
And I do want to, and we do make, and at King, and we do make efforts to make this a win-win. I mean,
Oh, definitely.
like I said, we don't go out there and throw a rig right in their backyard. I mean, with directional drilling and things like that, it's actually even a lot easier today than what it was when we were just doing a lot of vertical drilling, and it was kind of critical, within a few feet of where you were having to put a well, and now with directional and horizontal drilling, we can kind of put those pads off where they're not quite as onerous as they have been. Because again, at the end of the day, they are the ones that we work with day in and day out, and they do get compensated, for the inconvenience.
Yep.
So,
Steve,
Aaron
you're
and
absolutely right.
Aaron and Ian, tell me a little bit about how you guys would work together on a project. It can kind of give people a little bit. Ian, kind of talk a little bit more. You kind of talked about what you do, but as a reservoir engineer, there is a lot of things that go on. I mean, you get you're going to be getting everything from the geologist, and then you're going to take the data and try to basically make a determination on whether we will be able to extract or not extract the oil or gas from the reservoir. What are some of the things that you look at, I guess, first of all, that when you're trying to evaluate that?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. You mentioned geology, and obviously, at least my view is that we, as an industry, are so dependent on geology because that's one of the primary things you're going to need to produce oil and gas is to have a good reservoir. And that's where geology is, mapping and integrating more information to tell us where different trends go. And as a reservoir engineer, I work closely with geology to try to understand and refine the maps and try to come to a place where myself as an engineer and our geologist would agree or come up with some kind of model that we think predicts where best performance is. And so we rely very heavily on the geological mapping and keeping that always fresh to the most current information available. And when it comes to the land, I think, Steve, you mentioned sort of a bit of a real estate analogy that much like in real estate and oil and gas, you could say the location is pretty much, again, it's not everything, but it's pretty important. And that's obviously with land, that's Aaron's going to work primarily on a land view or a map view, shall we say, although he is concerned about depth also, but just keeping it simple in terms of a map view. We have an interaction where we keep an open conversation of where does the geology engineering conversation say we should be going, and conversely, Aaron's speaking into that, saying, well, where does he see opportunities on the land surface? And we sort of work off each other that way, where we may say, hey, what about over here? And Aaron will do some work to tell us whether we can go on a new trend, and vice versa. If Aaron comes up with some land opportunity, we will kind of get in gear to try to answer the question of whether we think it's a good place to go. And I think that's sort of the primary function, I would say. And one of the other great aspects that I think that maybe is missed a bit is that the land guys will also help us negotiate good terms, and that's a really other, say, between reservoir engineer and the land guy, there's a good conversation that's always going on about how do we optimize the value for our financial needs, and so the land guys can try to negotiate preferential terms or terms that make sense.
That's a good point. Aaron, can you kind of describe some of, when we do negotiate out a lease, some of the things that you're trying to trying to negotiate that will help benefit the economics from which, Ian's trying to accomplish in his evaluation.
Sure, Steve. Well, what's really important, and like I said, I work with with the mineral owners. I try to make sure that they're getting a fair deal, but of course, I'm trying to get the best deal I can make for King and make the well, give it the best chance to be a highly economic well. And so, to me, one of the, I'd just say some of the key pieces of, like, when I'm negotiating an oil and gas lease, it's the royalty, because I already have a pretty good idea of what they want, or kind of what are the I'd say the standards, and back in the day, when I say back in the day, we're talking early 1900s, all the way up to like 1970, 1980, it was very common for a royalty owner to get a 1/8 lease. That's 12.5%. And so that means that when
Aaron,
yep.
real quick, can you tell people when you talk about 12.5%, what that actually means as far as the revenue? I mean, as far as it being right off the top.
Yeah. What I was about to say was, so this is the thing about what is really great about people that are able to attain a royalty interest is it is purely mailbox money. I mean, that means that, let's say there's 5 owners, and it's what they'll have to do is split that 12.5%, amongst themselves. And that will just be, let's say when we get a monthly check, 12.5% of the gross minus some taxes will go directly to them. Now, that's different than as an oil and gas company. We will be getting our percentage, and it'll be the working interest percentage. So, where I'm going with this is, it was very common for a 1/8 interest. Well, that was great for the oil and gas company, but I think over the years, royalty owners were able to, they got better at maybe negotiating and realized, what, that sure is a lot of money. We need to be getting a little bit more. So what I saw over like a 10 or 20 year period is leases go from a 1/8 lease to even some families that were asking for a 1/4 royalty, which 25% royalty, which that would mean 25% of the gross proceeds would go to those royalty owners. So, but what I try to do is, said, I kind of have an idea of what is fair, which I try to be fair, but I don't want to be signing anybody with a 1/4 royalty lease. Yeah, it's just that's just something it makes it really difficult nowadays. Operators have so many costs involved with drilling the well and maintaining, and cost keeps rising, that we really got to somehow get that royalty back. In my mind, somewhere between a very common royalty is a 3/16, which is 18.75. So that would mean 18.75% of the royalty would be going to them, and we would be, as an oil and gas company, we would get the 81.25 is our. So it's just one of those things, but it makes a big difference between a family, a group maybe getting a 3/16 royalty compared to 25%. Those that 5 or 6, 7%. It really makes a big difference in the end when you're running the economics. So what I do think is fair for the most part in most producing regions, like a 1/5 lease, that is a good lease. I mean, that is really good for the oil and gas company, but that's also really good for the royalty. But of course, I would always like to get it a little less than that. I want to get a higher net revenue interest for the oil and gas company. So, any royalty below 20 is good, and that works well for the operator.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, that definitely affects the economics, and that's what we do when we're trying to evaluate projects and be able to determine that we need to move forward with them. Because sometimes it does happen that if the royalties are too high, and the determination is made that the wells aren't going to produce and be able to cover that, we would not be an economic viable project for us to enter into. Well, guys, we're getting fairly close to the end of the webinar. I want to thank you too for being here.
Sure.
Again, I want to also mention to everybody that we do have a webinar coming up on Thursday, May 14th. It's going to have John Mauldin, our chief economist, and Dan Steffens, who's with Energy Perspectives Group. And fortunately for all of you, Rachel will be back. It will not be me hosting, so that will be very much a positive. But they'll be talking about what's next for the oil and gas, pricing trends, investment strategy. I mean, it should be a strong conversation for anyone watching the energy markets. I mean, we do have a lot of things going on these days, and I mean, a lot of them are geopolitical, which will be temporary, but we don't know how long that's going to be, and there's still going to be long-term effects to that. But I believe that the team's dropping that link down in the comments as we speak. So if you want to click on that and enroll, we would be glad to have you. So again, I thank you all very much for tuning in today. I hope it was informative. If you have any questions, please reach out to your SVPs, and we'll be back here next week at the same time. And we again, Ian, Aaron, I appreciate you all coming on, and thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Enjoyed it.